Hello, everybody. Welcome into DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. My name's Brandon Adams. We're good to have you with us, or I should say we're glad to have you with us for what is our final edition of the program from the confines of my own home. We make our triumphant return to the DawgNation World Headquarters Studios tomorrow. Boy, I'm incredibly excited about that and very thankful to have had all of you with the journey throughout this process as we try to get back to normal, rebuild our state, rebuild our economy, keep everybody healthy, and keep washing our hands, I guess. So we're looking forward to all of that. I'm also looking forward to today's show as well. I'm going to bring on Connor Riley in just a moment. We're going to talk about a bunch of things. Let me set this up in part now, and admittedly, a lot of this topic is going to have to be covered in the podcast edition of our show today. I'm going to get more in detail on this. Thought it was cool to see on social media, of course, the last couple of days that it is now official with Jamie Newman. He is a Wake Forest grad, which in its own right is quite an accomplishment for Mr. Newman to have that diploma in his hand. He shared that on social media, and now he will begin a phase of his life that, as I've said before in the show, I hope he's prepared for what's coming next, because his last day of anonymity was yesterday. If that was even indeed possible then, he is about to be a very well-known young man. He steps into the fray now as a Wake Forest grad and officially as a quarterback on the Georgia roster. I presume eventually the starter for this team, and there is a lot of attention on him now because of that. I saw where our buddy Bill Bender from the Sporting News, we may try to get Bill on the show sometime soon to talk about this, had Newman ranked among the top 10 quarterbacks in all of college football at a recent list at sportingnews.com, putting him ahead of every other quarterback in the SEC and every other transfer there as well. That's a little bit of kind of a snapshot of the current expectations in place for the recent Wake Forest grad, Jamie Newman. And obviously it's fair for a Georgia fan to ask. In fact, we've asked a good bit of this on our show over the course of the last few weeks, last couple of months. Are there too many expectations being placed on Newman? Whether it be national media predicting him to do really well, Georgia fans hoping that he leads Georgia to the spot where it kind of hasn't been the last couple of years. Is this too much on Jamie Newman? It remains to be seen. But I guess the one thing that I do want to spend some more time unpacking today and getting more in detail on this on the podcast edition of our show a little bit later on is, as Newman makes the transition from ACC anonymity to SEC spotlight, he does have something to aid him, someone maybe even to aid him with that. And I think that you look at George Pickens for that. And I'm going to play some audio on the podcast edition of our show later on today where Pickens, after the Sugar Bowl, talked about how Jake Fromm was such a big help to him last season during practice, pushing him to get better, but also just kind of a bedrock to lean on and learn from and grow from. And in hearing Pickens say that about Fromm last season, at the end of last season, after a huge game for Pickens in the Sugar Bowl, it's kind of cool to think the tables may be now turned. Much the same way that Fromm was a tremendous resource for Pickens in his first year in the SEC last year, maybe Pickens has a chance to be that for Jamie Newman this year. I'm sure many of you saw the Pro Football Focus tweet about the fact that Pickens is the only player in the country last year to have more than 75 targets without dropping a ball all season long. It's obviously a little bit of a testament to how good of a freshman season Pickens had, and maybe even a suggestion of how good of a sophomore campaign he can also put together. So Pickens as a instrument aiding Jamie Newman's transition to the SEC this season. We're going to talk a lot about that on our podcast and with Connor Riley coming up in just a moment. Before that, let me remind you, the DawgNation Daily today is brought to you by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Engineered Solutions of Georgia is great at a couple of things that are really important. Helping you battle some sort of foundation issue or waterproofing problem. Let's face it, when we've had as much rain as we've had this year, you notice water creeping in a way you may not have seen before, into your basement or wet spot in your crawl space, sometimes even your garage. This kind of shows up as well. As you know, you've been told this before, this is not new information, that if you don't get that treated, that leads to a more serious problem later on. In fact, some of you may also be seeing the evidence of some of those more serious issues when it comes to the foundation stuff, the horizontal cracks that may show up in your foundation. That's obviously the kind of thing that needs to be fixed right away. Now, the good news is some of this stuff is not always as difficult to fix as it may seem. Other times it's a more substantial fix. And if that's the case, all the more reason to have my friends at ESOG doing work for you, because they have 2 full-time engineers on staff. Smart people that understand the structural integrity of your home and how it all fits together. You want them doing that work for you. Engineered Solutions of Georgia is also a proud partner of UGA. which makes them really fun to do business with, and they're good friends of ours here on DawgNation Daily. And they could not be easier to get in touch with. Very, very easy phone number to remember. To get in touch with Engineered Solutions of Georgia, dial 678-ESOG now. That's 678-ESOG now. That'll get you in touch, my friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia. With that said, let's dive into our conversation. Let's get ready to welcome in DawgNation's Connor Riley. And Connor, let me begin kind of with you where I was discussing a moment ago. When it comes to Jamie Newman, the growing hype that's around him and the things that people even outside the bubble of DawgNation are saying, that's obviously a lot of pressure to put on a young man, the recently minted Wake Forest grad. But I do think the presence of George Pickens, what he did last year as a freshman, what he could do as a sophomore, if you're facing a lot of big expectations as a quarterback, if you're facing more attention and pressure than you're used to having a guy like Pickens lined out on the outside as a target to throw to, that's going to make that process at least a little bit easier, I would imagine.
Yeah, and if you actually go back and like I did and look at Jamie Newman's time at Wake Forest, there's a wide receiver they have by the name of Sage Surratt. He's a very good wide receiver, probably someone that should have a little bit more national recognition. And if you look at the on-off numbers from when he was on the field with Newman to when he was off the field with Newman, it is a Lawrence Cager, like with Jake Fromm, sort of gap in between having a receiver of that caliber on the field versus not. And obviously that makes a lot of sense. You want to have more talented players on the field around you to help you out. But on the field, with Surratt, Newman, 29 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, completed 63% of his passes. With Surratt not on the field, 6 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 53% completion percentage. So I expect Pickens at the very least to have a sort of similar aspect on Newman's numbers. And I think obviously as good as Surratt is, I think Pickens might have the highest ceiling of any wide receiver currently in college football. So if Georgia is able, I think, to get, and Newman specifically is able to get the most out of George Pickens, that's going to in turn make Newman look a whole lot better.
Yeah, Jeff Sintel, our buddy, shared a photo with us. I guess it was on Newman's Instagram story at one point of the Jordan Pippen. The faces of Jordan Pippen were taken away. The face of Jamie Newman was there. The face of George Pickens was there. And typically you might expect the quarterback in the situation to be the Michael Jordan, especially if the quarterback's the one sharing it. But in this particular graphic, it was Pickens in the Jordan body. It was Newman in the Scottie Pippen body, obviously signifying that Newman would play second fiddle to George Pickens. And I think there's a really cool symbolism with all of that. I don't know that a wide receiver's impact is going to be greater than the impact of a quarterback. But the fact that Newman is willing to come in and at least to the extent you can read into a Instagram story pic, the fact that he's willing to come in and be sort of thought of as complementing what already exists with George Pickens as opposed to the opposite, I think that says something kind of cool about Jamie Newman's psyche potentially. And I do think there is a symbolic explanation for kind of how the Georgia offense might work this season.
Yeah, and as a big Scottie Pippen fan, I'd point out Jordan never won anything until Scottie Pippen became Scottie Pippen. So if you're maybe looking to rationalize why you'd have a wide receiver as your Michael Jordan, I certainly think Newman as a Pippen type would be pretty interesting. Does that make Dominic Blaylock, Dennis Rodman, or Horace Grant? Does that make
I hope not.
Zamir White a Steve Kerr?
Yeah.
So we'll see from there.
No, it would be fun to kind of line all that up. I mean, I've said this a million times. In the college football playoff era, no team has won a national championship that didn't have at least one receiver exceed 900 receiving yards. So receiver play has been important for the champions in the college football playoff era. And if you want to have a more, I guess, practical conversation about how all this works between Newman and Pickens, I'm going to say something that not everyone's going to agree with. If you and I are aware of what Pickens did a season ago and aware of what the hype for him is going into year two, opposing defensive coordinators are aware of this as well. And one of the problems of being a receiver, sometimes smart defensive coaches, it's easier to take away a receiver than it is to take away a quarterback or take away a running game. Sometimes the way you bracket coverage or whatever else, you can neutralize the play of a receiver, which leads me to say this. If Pickens is going to have as good a sophomore year as we think he can, and if he's going to help Jamie Newman's SEC transition as much as he probably needs to, here's the one thing I think you need to be comfortable with. Got to be comfortable with the occasional dangerous throw. I think one of the things that some people have said about Newman in his time in Wake Forest is that he was willing to throw the ball into a tight window. I think all good quarterbacks are. I don't think every throw at the college level for the big-time players is going to be to a wide-open receiver. You've got to be comfortable throwing into a tight window. And frankly, Connor, I'll go so far as to say this. I'll tolerate the occasional interception from Newman if that interception is based on an attempt to get Pickens the ball. What I'm not going to tolerate is one of these games in which George Pickens is hardly targeted. At the end of the game, it's a shrug from the coaching staff that says, well, what do you want us to do? They're taking him away with the defensive coaching scheme. I think that you've got to, and I know not everyone's going to agree with this, but I'm going to stand behind it. If Newman's going to have the best year he possibly can, he's going to have to try to force the ball to Pickens a little bit, even when defenses are trying to take that away.
Yeah, I think you could point to some of the struggles Jake Fromm had specifically in those LSU games where if you're trying so hard to not make a mistake, and obviously all coaches, Kirby Smart in particular, preach not making mistakes, not turning the ball over on the offensive side of the ball. Sometimes trying so hard not to do that can really hurt you, I think, as a quarterback and a team. And I think you really only have to look at that 2016 Clemson team. Deshaun Watson was intercepted 17 times during that season. And I think most coaches would probably find that to be a little too high, perhaps unacceptable. Can you imagine Kirby Smart, probably tearing his hair out if you told him at the beginning of the year this quarterback was going to throw 17 interceptions. But Deshaun Watson was also talented enough to know that, hey, over the course, for every interception I throw, I'm going to make 4 great throws to make up for it. Now, I'm not saying Newman is obviously going to be Deshaun Watson. I know a lot of people want to say, oh, he's going to be the next Joe Burrow. But if he's making 3 spectacular throws or 3 really good throws to every 1 interception that he throws, I think that's a ratio that you can live with. And to your larger point, you have to take it's the whole to make money, you have to spend money. I think to succeed, you're going to, especially on the offensive side of the ball with Georgia this year, you're going to have to take some more risks.
I think the phrase you're looking for is scared money doesn't make money.
Make money, yes.
To close out this conversation, I'll be a philosophical blowhard here for a moment. We're all working so hard to get football back on the field, and we're all I think, experiencing the pain of what life has been like without sports. With all that as the backdrop, this is no year to play it safe. You know what I'm saying? Like you get back on the field. This is no year to play it safe, calling running plays or safe throws. You got to swing for the fences. If we're lucky enough to be back in a stadium watching college football this fall, then by all means, just let it rip and go for it.
Yeah, I certainly think, with Kirby Smart and sort of the concerns and criticisms about his offenses in recent years, why not just go all out this year and just say, hey, any chance we're getting to play right now is a gifted chance, so let's just make the most of it and just let it rip.
And if it doesn't work, just blame it on the coronavirus.
And they have a perfect built-in excuse for if the offense fails this year. So.
Yeah. I think that's exactly right. By the way, with all the attention being paid to Newman's Wake Forest graduation, I saw on Trey McKitty's Instagram, he was also dressed in cap and gown there. I think that McKitty's one of those guys, because we spend so much time talking about other people, that McKitty gets lost in the discussion a little bit. Obviously, he probably wouldn't be available on the transfer market as a grad transfer if things had gone perfectly for him at Florida State. We've had Florida State experts on our show before explain why things were imperfect for McKitty in the Seminoles offense in the past. However, at the risk of hyping him too much, there's an element of McKitty's stat profile that reminds me a little bit of Lawrence Cager leaving Miami after last year. Someone that, was just kind of in the mix, but there were certain numbers that suggested, hey, maybe he could be better at Georgia than people realize. For Cager, it was the touchdown number. For McKitty, it's probably the overall number of times that he was targeted by the Florida State offense. This was clearly a guy who was a part of their offensive plans. I'm not going to tell you that McKitty is as impactful as Cager was for Georgia last year when he was healthy, although it's fair to point out Cager was much more impactful than most people would have assumed he was. All I'm saying is, let's not forget this young man's about to be on this roster. I guess that's the point that I'm getting to here. An experienced tight end who's played with a quarterback who's, maybe looking for a reliable target. That could be a fun combination as well, Newman to McKitty.
Yeah, he took the words right out of my mouth with the Cager comparison there. I certainly think from a talent and production standpoint, what we've seen, Trey McKitty's a better tight end than Eli Wolf. And Eli Wolf, while at flashes, I think he showed that he was could have been a more productive tight end. It had the offense as a whole had a better year. I do think that McKitty is a guy who, Georgia's not asking him to come in and be the guy. They're probably not even asking him to come in and do what Lawrence Cager did a season ago. But I think if he can fill that role of, hey, just be open, and if the ball is thrown to you, the ball is thrown to you, I do think that's going to make things easier for Blaylock, Pickens, and all the other outside wide receivers. And in turn, with all the attention that's going to be on Pickens and Blaylock, that's going to make things a lot easier for McKitty. And I think, with all the struggles Florida State has had in the past couple of years, the fact that he's now really walking into a stable situation for probably the first time in his college career could help things open up for him quite a bit.
I'm making the assumption that a Todd Monken offense has fewer 2 tight end sets than Georgia has favored in the Jim Chaney, James Coley era. You think that's a safe assumption?
I don't know. I know with Tampa Bay, they used a lot of multiple tight end looks when they had O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate. Now, obviously, those are 2 very good NFL caliber tight ends. But I think it'll be interesting this year, and that might be one of the areas you look to see if how much Kirby is sort of letting his hands go off the wheels, because it's pretty clear that he likes having multiple tight end sets, of having sort of bigger formations. And, if we're still seeing a lot of Rylan Goede, Trey McKitty, Darnell Washington, Trey McKitty, John Fitzpatrick, Trey McKitty, looks and formations this year, that might lead me to believe that Kirby Smart has not totally let go of the offensive control this season.
Yeah, listen, I've said before, I want to see Goede and Fitzpatrick get their chance. I think they're both pretty interesting prospects. But you mentioned Howard with the Bucs in 2018. If memory serves, he got hurt that season. But prior to that, I think you saw Monken willing to get him the ball. And by the way, for O.J. Howard, a former 5-star coming out of high school, when he was at Alabama, he's a lot like the Georgia tight ends, a guy that didn't get used a ton unless they were playing Clemson in a national championship game. But Monken, in that year of play calling for the Bucs, seemingly was willing to target Howard a lot. I think that Howard dealt with an injury that year. But other than that, Monken kind of showed a willingness to kind of get O.J. Howard involved.
Right, and I think the thing you have to like with Monken is, in the history of his offenses, he loves to feed guys who are the guy. And to sort of wrap it back around to George Pickens, you look at the numbers Justin Blackmon had as a collegiate wide receiver. You look at how Mike Evans played under Monken in Tampa Bay. Even this past year, you look at the success that even though Monken obviously wasn't calling plays, you look at the success that Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry had. He has done a very good job of, and this is sort of like how Lane Kiffin calls his offenses, of identifying who his best players are and just feeding them the ball until they throw up. So I think if you're one of Georgia's top playmakers this year, if you're a George Pickens, you're a Zamir White, expect perhaps a heavier workload than you would have if James Coley or Jim Chaney were your head offensive coordinator.
Today, one of the top prospects in the state of Georgia, Barrett Carter, is going to make his commitment. It's not going to be to Georgia. My assumption is it's going to be to Clemson. At least that's my best guess based on the online chatter that's out there. Connor, I've obviously liked Carter as a player. I'm just totally resigned on this fact now. It's one of the most amazing recruiting stories out there. The fact that Georgia has missed on some elite Atlanta area prospects over the last couple of years, and frankly, felt no ill effects from that whatsoever, is really pretty fascinating. If we made a list of the guys from within the Atlanta area that Georgia's missed on, you would assume that would be devastating for a program's recruiting profile. Georgia hasn't skipped a beat. And you can't say that they didn't want Carter. It seems obvious they did. And maybe one time it seemed like he might be going there. The same way you'd say about some other Metro Atlanta prospects. This is not a case of Georgia not prioritizing the player or whatever else. It's something about the player choosing to go elsewhere. And Georgia goes nationally in almost every one of these instances. And I think in Carter's case, it's going to work out much the same way. Replaces him with a national player that's every bit as good, if not a higher rated player. It's really pretty fascinating. I'm stopped worrying about this. Obviously, it's just more fascinating to me than anything. Georgia is missing out on some Metro Atlanta kids, and yet recruiting-wise is seemingly not hurt by it at all. It's not nearly as easy as Georgia has made it look.
Yeah, I think Georgia's it's like they have an easy way of doing things, which is, obviously no one's ever going to be able to lock down the state of Georgia or specifically the Metro Atlanta area. But there's certainly an easier, we just focus on in-state kids, we do well there. And then for the occasional recruiting battle, they go out of state and they pull a guy in. Sort of like what you saw they do in the 2017 class. But now it seems like they're just willing to fight all recruiting battles across the country, and they're actually able to win a lot of these. I'll have something later on today on DawgNation after Carter makes his decision. This is still clearly, I think, a loss for Georgia in the sense that you can't have Kirby Smart come out and say linebacker is our most important recruiting position, in this cycle. You have one of the best linebacker prospects in the country in your own backyard at North Gwinnett High School. And to see him probably go to Clemson, that is still qualifies as a loss. Having said all that, Georgia is also very well positioned with, as you brought up, a number of other recruiting targets. Obviously, Shmuel Munden is a name to know there, and him potentially teasing a June commitment is something to watch. Xavier Story, I think, now becomes a really big name to watch at that linebacker position out of Florida, and he's something you actually saw last week with those Apex Predator posters that they were posting. I found it very interesting that Story got one of those, and Chaz Chambliss got one of those, but Carter did not. I think that's a reading of the tea leaves there. But to your larger point, it is sort of amazing that Georgia has had this lack of success sort of recruiting the prospects it's closest to. And if this were to happen at Tennessee, if this were to happen at Alabama, if this were to happen in Florida, you'd go on there and you'd kill Dan Mullen, Jeremy Pruitt, and Nick Saban. But sure. I think the fact that Kirby has shown that, hey, while sure we lose out on a few, high-end Metro Atlanta stars, we can go out to Los Angeles and get a linebacker. We can go out to Scottsdale, Arizona, and get a 5-star cornerback. We can go, all over the country and land some of the best prospects from there.
Well, you mentioned Tennessee. This is not hypothetical. This did happen at Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Clemson came into the state of Tennessee and took all the best players. T. Higgins comes to mind as a for instance on this. And Tennessee did what most programs do in that scenario. They completely collapsed and had no one to replace them with, which is another example of what Georgia has done to counterbalance that of right now Clemson's got a big brand. Geographically, it's a lot closer to Suwanee, Georgia than a lot of people realize. And so in losing this battle, you simply regroup, you go win nationally with somebody else, the same way Darnell Washington, as opposed to Rick Gilbert or, George Pickens as opposed to Jaden Hazelwood, all of these examples that you want to cite, Georgia has simply gone out and won a different battle when it lost the battle within its own borders. But Clemson, very legitimately dealing with the same issue going into Tennessee, stealing its best players for a great number of years. Tennessee had no response whatsoever.
Exactly. The metaphor. So, we obviously just saw The Last Dance wrap up, and Larry Bird had an iconic moment in there. But there's a story about Larry Bird, how sometimes during the regular season, especially after he'd ascended to MVP levels, that sometimes he'd just get bored in games and would try doing different things. So for one game, he just decided for the entire game he was going to shoot left-handed.
Yeah.
And I kind of think maybe that's where Georgia is at in a recruiting sense. Like, yeah, sure, it'd be easy to just rein in our local kids, do as good a job as you can recruiting the Metro Atlanta area. And I actually think, if Georgia was going to lose a Metro Atlanta area kid, I think going forward, you're going to bet it's probably to Clemson because they've done as good a job as anyone recruiting that area. But to your point again, Georgia didn't land Tank Bigsby in the last class. They landed Kendall Milton, who might be as good, if not a better, and I think a better prospect than Bigsby. You look at, Darnell Washington or Reed Gilbert. So, Georgia has missed out on some of those local prospects, and I do think Carter counts as I don't know how significant, but it is a miss. But Georgia's still probably in the long run going to be fine at that linebacker spot because of what they're able to do and who they're able to sell to across the country.
Let me finish with this. I'm more and more confident by the day that we're playing 12 regular season games, all of them in the fall, all of them when they originally scheduled. The one holdout on all of this has seemed to be the Pac-12 because of the shelter in place that's currently in place in the city of Los Angeles. But very quietly, you may have seen last week that the city of LA gave a go-ahead to the Lakers to kind of get back working in their practice facility as kind of forgiveness of what typically would be the shelter in place there. There have been a lot of talk recently about professional sports returning to both New York and California, some of the states that are most stringent with their lockdown stuff. Governor of Michigan's walked back some of her talk about not having, fans in stands for the upcoming season. I really think all of this, not to bring politics into it, but I think all of this suggests that we're heading for a season that's a lot more normal than not, and maybe a lot more normal than some people have assumed it would have been as recently as a couple of weeks ago. Do you see it unfolding the same way?
Yeah, like you, I've sort of long been in the camp of I think we're going to have football. I think there's enough time from when this virus obviously started impacting things to when the season starts to where we should, in theory, be able to get our act together and have testing and treatment protocols in place to sort of mitigate some of the concerns with this. I do think California coming out yesterday and saying pro sports can return in the month of June, I think that was a significant step, for a return to normalcy across the spectrum. I've always sort of held the belief that the South is going to push forward and have as normal a college football season as it can. But again, this is, I think, all just a positive sign, and we have to continue to make these small progressive steps in the sense that, while yes, things are reopening, if we want to have, as you say, a totally normal season where, the president is saying he wants to pack the stands, and I've said prediction-wise, I think that Georgia-Alabama game might have 110,000 people at it, including the president himself. We still, while there is progress being made, we still have to continue to take the small steps, wear masks, be cautious, and I'll be very interested to see what the SEC presidents decide to do this Friday with their vote of when do they allow players back on campus, and I think that'll go maybe a long way in showing how quickly things potentially return to normal.
I'm going long, and I apologize, but with the vote coming up this Friday about returning back to campus for the programs themselves, it's been reported that Philip Fulmer is against a June 1st return, which means not all athletic directors are unanimous in their support of this. If that is indeed the case with Fulmer, as has been reported by Matt Jones of Kentucky Sports Radio. You think the dissenting voice here matters in this vote for the chancellors and the presidents? Obviously, they don't want anybody to be able to say, see, I told you so, if something goes wrong. If Fulmer is really against this, do you think that matters? Do you think that could hold things up?
I don't think so. Because I actually think what you've seen with California and New York and them allowing or easing up of their restrictions on professional sports, I think when it comes down to it, people just aren't going to want to be left behind. And if a majority of the schools are okay with this and they're accepting the risks that come with this, if you say, no, we're going to hold out and sit back and see and wait and see for things to develop, I think, you're going to say, fine, we'll just leave you behind because, I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not a disease expert. But if you're expecting a vaccine, a cure to come very quickly, I wouldn't hold your breath for that. So ultimately, it all comes down to risk management and how much risk you're willing to associate and accept with this thing. And it's pretty clear that some schools are willing to accept more. And if you're not, you're going to get left behind. And while that's maybe not the best message in the world to have, if you want to continue to play with the big boys, that's just something you have to deal with at the table.
All right, very last thing, and I mean this seriously, although it's a totally ridiculous topic. You mentioned that your belief that there'll be 100,000 people in Tuscaloosa for Georgia, Alabama. Now, Connor, this is the intersection of two things that I really want. I really want a normal football season. I also really want Georgia to beat Alabama. It stands to reason that it's easier to beat Alabama in an empty stadium. So what do I want more here? Do I want the normalcy of, hey, you got the crowds in there? Because if there's no fans for Georgia, Alabama, that means there's no fans for probably any game for the first 3 weeks. If that's true in SEC country, then, heaven knows what some of the other places around the country are doing. So what do I want more here? Or what should I want more? Should I want the normalcy of the loud crowd, or should I want the easier win on the road and the Alabama fans having to complain about the fact their team would have won the game had the stadium not been empty?
So I think the last point you made there is why you want the stadium full, because you're just going to be hearing bombardments from all sides. Oh, Georgia only won because there were no fans in the stand.
Yeah.
Last little tangent. I watched some of the Bundesliga this weekend, for German professional soccer league, getting things up and running. It is a little bit of an adjustment from just a watching standpoint of seeing fans not in the stands. But, I think there's certainly a lot of time between now and that September 19th game. And I think, from your standpoint as someone who has to deal with, God, it's been so long since I looked at the comment section. Who's the one really good Bama commenter?
G. Grace on YouTube.
G. Grace, yeah. Look, as much as I like G. Grace, you don't want to give him any extra ammunition and saying, sure, Georgia only won that game because there were no fans in the stands. So I think if you're wearing your DawgNation shirt and your Georgia hat, you want fans in the stands that day.
I think you're probably right about that. Just give me the full stadium. Give me Alabama's best shot. That's more enjoyable. Plus, this may be one of those years we got to take one for the team and just root for America's return to normalcy more so than anything else. Good stuff, Connor. We appreciate you being here. I'll see you tomorrow in our DawgNation World Headquarters studios for a live return to the show presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Thanks so much for that. I really appreciate you, everything that you've done, and I'll look forward to speaking to you soon.
Can't wait, BA. Looking forward to it.
Good stuff there from Connor Riley, and huge thanks to our buddy Michael Carvel, who's made all this possible here at home. I'm going to bring on my kids here before the end of the show, too. I want to give them a big thank you for the fact that they found a way to keep quiet for an hour every day over the course of the last weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. We are really excited about being back in our DawgNation World Headquarters studios tomorrow as we do our own part to help contribute to a return to normalcy. An important next step for our state, an important next step for our country, and in a weird way, and I'll be kind of a blowhard for a second, then we'll get to your comments. For as much as I want to see Georgia win a national championship, and as much as I want to see, the results of the season that I'm hoping for, the truth is, in a way, just playing football is the real win. And, seeing us, work hard and push back against negativity and just rebuild our lives is the real win that we're all cheering for and chasing after right now. So I'm happy to be a part of that here. Hope the news continues to be good. We'll cross our fingers for that and deal with whatever comes. But we're going to try to. We're going to try to have a great summer, getting ready for what we think can be a really fun fall. We appreciate all of you being a part of that. With that said, get ready to take your comments. It's our R.S. Andrews cool down. Our friends at R.S. Andrews can take care of you with air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. They can do all of that this time of year. You start thinking about those air conditioning units. Is your house cool enough to make it through the summer that's on its way? Well, if you want some peace of mind on that, make sure you check out R.S. Andrews. They'll give you that $99 Smiley tune-up to your air conditioning. They'll get it back to factory fresh specs and give you the comfort that you need to feel good about staying comfortable with nice cold air inside your home all the way around. Find them online at rsandrews.com. All right, Facebook first today. We'll do YouTube after that. And we'll get ready to roll on here on a Tuesday. If you want more of the Newman Pickens topic, we'll do more of that on our podcast here coming up in just a little bit, too. I'll play some audio of what Pickens said about how Fromm helped him. I'll make the case and the connection about how Pickens now has a chance to help Newman in much the same way. So we'll talk a lot about that. Steve Weimer says, and I hope I pronounced your last name correctly, he says, I think beating Bama is tough, whether they're fans in the stands or not. It'll be a huge win either way. I think that's probably true. Michael Webb says must be a heat wave starting the cool down near 30 minutes left. I don't know what make it 30 minutes today. We may get off the air in about 15 minutes or so. Jan Armistead, thanks for the kind words. Appreciate that. Travis Hall, thank you for the kind words. Appreciate that. Benevolent Zeus and the subject of fans returning. He says he's going to be watching from home either way. Listen, for a lot of people, that's the comfortable way of choice, watching from home. But no matter how you plan on watching the games this fall, thanks for sharing the season with us. Daniel Aldridge, thanks for the kind words. Randy Hall says, let's have an event at Marlowe's in July. So I do have a really good idea for this. Now, frankly, I haven't gotten Marlowe's to sign off on this yet, so I may shouldn't say too much about it. But I think I have a pretty good idea about how we can do something really fun at Marlowe's while also maintaining social distancing. I can't give you too much of the details on this now because even as we get back to the return to restaurants, we're still going to have to be responsible. We're still going to have to, take care of our fellow, people. So I think there's a way to support Marlowe's. There's a way for us to get together and a way to maintain social distancing. And for some of you who've said, hey, maybe we haven't, been out to the Marlowe's Tavern in your neighborhood before, there's a way to maybe do that too. Like I said, I can't say too much about this because I haven't gotten Marlowe's to say, yes, you can do this. But I do have an idea for this we're going to talk more about. Trust me when I tell you, we've got some huge, huge summer plans, some very big summer plans, because if we're out and about, we're doing things again. I got a long list of stuff that I want to do, and I want to invite all of you to do with us. So you're thinking about, I just can't say too much because I'm going to get in trouble. But you think about some of the things we've done in the summer before, a version of that kind of stuff coming up. I got a lot of plans, Matt Rukavina says, how long has it been from the Adams house? That's a good question. It would have been, I guess, the first week after the SEC basketball tournament. That's when we started from home. It would have been the week that was supposed to be the NCAA tournament, and that's when we started using the homemade graphics. And at that point in time, I was doing the show from in my office, or I use air quotes around this office. And I just decided it was too dark in there. You'll remember I had the one camera, one laptop here, the one laptop there. I was having to turn back and forth to do the Facebook and the YouTube. And, finally, we've kind of worked our way to now it's speaking just directly into the one laptop. And our buddy Michael Carvel, who's at the comfort of his own home. And he's the one that puts everything you see on the screen, the R.S. Andrews cool down, or, whatever's going on with our friends from ESOG or whatever else, kind of takes care of you of all of that. So it's been kind of amazing to watch how it's grown. And what has been so gratifying for me is the fact that so many of you have been willing to tune in and be a part of this each and every day. That's a big ask at a time in which, admittedly, there's less going on. And the excitement of spring practice, we didn't get that. We just blew right past what was supposed to be G-Day. And, we're kind of in a limbo situation right now. But y'all have just kind of kept showing up. And I've really appreciated that. I've been very grateful for that. And hopefully we reward your loyalty to us with a lot of really good shows coming up and some big ideas about those. By the way, Philip Jordan Wells mentions Justin Fields. I also saw on Justin Fields' Instagram story, I guess he and Jamie Newman were throwing together recently with is it Quincy Avery, is that the name of the quarterback's coach? It's about breaking the internet. That's a kind of a break the internet moment there, I guess. Let's see. Good to see Jamie Bailey checking in today. Good to see Dante Eady. By the way, speaking of Dante, I noticed this yesterday. So y'all may have noticed this some too. I'm trying to be a little bit more active on Facebook. I've never really been very active on Facebook whatsoever. I do a little bit of Twitter. I really no Facebook activity for the most part at all. It's just kind of always been, I guess, my weird thing or whatever. But I'm trying to be a little bit more active. I'm trying to accept the friend requests for those of you who sent them to me. And I know some of you have sent me messages over the years. I've been very, very, I just frankly didn't even know they were there. So tried to respond to a few of those. I believe our buddy Dante Eady sent me a friend request. I tried to accept it. It was turned down because he's got 5,000 friends. So good for you, Dante. Rolling with 5,000 friends. Pretty impressive. Pretty impressive. Phil Rogers says, tell your dog friends who park in the RV city, you better get in touch with the city about the parking. I think that means for the Georgia-Florida game, so be paying attention to that. James Crump says, to keep the beard, it gives me a sophisticated look. I appreciate that, James. Yeah, so far the feedback on the beard's really been pretty good. Philip Jordan Wells says, I'm going to miss the kitchen. You never cook live breakfast in BA. Yeah, we should have cooked in here at some point in time. Turn this into like one of the Today Show or one of those things where you have the cooking going on back there. I've told you before, my wife's always self-conscious about if there's ever any dishes in the sink or anything like that. She's always afraid it's going to show up. She never wants that to be the case. So I've been very grateful. Now, as said before, I'm going to miss not having to commute every day. I've got shorts on right now. No shoes on. When the podcast is done, just kind of roll right into lunch. There's a lot about being home that's been really good these last little bit. So we're gonna be doing some of that. Let's see what's going on over here on YouTube for a little bit. And William Cobb thanking the kids for the work that they did on our sponsor graphics that we've used before. Let me see if I can give you the. Let me see if I can give you these. Yeah, so here's our R.S. Andrews cool down. That's the original R.S. Andrews cool down graphic that we used. They did a good job with that. Colby Curry says, spill them beans, BA. Spill the beans about what? Devin Glenn had this prediction from Devin, who says that Pickens will be the best receiver to ever play at Georgia after this season, over 1,000 yards and SEC champs. It is fair to say that the guy probably currently viewed in that, it's really two guys. It's A.J. Green for the spectacular way in which he played, and it's Terrence Edwards for the stats that he put up. And Edwards owns all the statistical records. He did predict last year that Pickens would break his record. So Devin's standing on pretty firm ground on all of this, because the guy who holds those records, Terrence Edwards, has said that he believes that Pickens will beat him. So now, from that standpoint, no one will eclipse Edwards in terms of the memories that Georgia fans have of his career and the fact that he's still such an influential figure around the program. But Edwards has predicted that Pickens will break his records. Heath Thatcher, thanks for the kind words. He says, so thankful that you welcomed us into your home to keep this slice of normal. It's meant the world. Heath, it's meant the world to me there as well. And slice of normal really is what it is. That I think we've all learned through all of this how sports unites us together. And the belief that we would have football has kind of kept us, I think, you got to have something to make you want to just get up and do this every day, right? Whatever your this is, whether it be, dealing with the pressure of an unknown job situation, or being a good homeschool teacher to your children, or maintaining your essential work during a time in which that's more dangerous than it's been before. It's the belief that one day things will be better that helps power that and propel that. And so I'm glad that, Heath, you do see this as a form of normalcy, because that's certainly like what we've tried to do and be a part of. So I really appreciate that. Christopher Wilson, going back to the subject of, do you want a quiet, empty Bryant-Denny to make it easier to win, or do you want to, have a normal stadium because it means a return to normalcy? Christopher Wilson says, I'm torn because there'll be no greater feeling than making Bryant-Denny go quiet. Boy, I tell you, that's true. I was lucky enough to be at the last two Georgia wins in Bryant-Denny Stadium. The one in 2002, which was a very good game, a part of a really fun season, the man enough game for Georgia against Alabama. I was also there in 2007 when Matthew Stafford threw the game-winning touchdown on the first play of Georgia's drive in overtime to Mikey Henderson. You got to realize, this is year one of Nick Saban. This was unbelievable excitement in Tuscaloosa about what Saban was going to be. Now, the first year turned out not to be that great, but at the time, Alabama fans were just so excited about the Saban era, and to have Georgia come in there, take the game from them in overtime was really thrilling. And as you said, that's an example of a loud crowd up making noise on defense. Touchdown, game over, total silence. It's a great feeling. It's a great feeling to be a part of. To think that Georgia might be able to do that here this year that's pretty cool to think about. Pretty cool to think about all the way around. I think I hear my kids starting to make their way over here. We'll let them come on here when they're ready. Bill McConnell, thanks for the kind words, encouraging people to hit the like button. I appreciate that. Here they come over here. Let's say hello to my son, Charlie. Let's say hello to my daughter, Kate. Kate, why don't you come on this side? Oh, you got some Tic Tacs. Kate, why don't you come around on this side over here? So,
it's actually for birthday.
Charlie, you come here a little tighter. Yeah, Kate, I'll bring you up here so people can see. And y'all wish Kate a happy 5th birthday. She turns 5 today. Charlie will bring you in here so you can see a little bit better. And I wanted to bring both of y'all on camera to say thank you, because I know it's hard to stay quiet for an hour. I know that's not an easy thing to do, but y'all have made doing the show from home so easy, and you have done such a good job of getting your schoolwork done and not being too loud so we can do the show. I just wanted to say how much I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Y'all look at Charlie. He's got his baseball jersey on. He didn't get to have a season this year, but he's still supporting that baseball jersey. We love to see that. Kate turns 5 years old today. Kate, you got some big birthday plans?
She doesn't know him yet.
Oh, she doesn't know him yet. Well, she may be in for some fun a little bit later on.
I only know my mommy's plans about birthday.
Well, she's got some exciting stuff that she's going to be able to do. So thanks to both of you for coming on by here. You want to wave bye to everybody?
Bye-bye.
So thank you all for stopping by, and I'm going to wrap things up, and I'll come be back with you in just a minute, okay? Thank you all for coming by. Appreciate that.
Can I do it?
So big thanks to both the kids. One of these days, they'll probably take over for me, probably at some point in time. Say bye to everybody, then.
Bye-bye.
All right, we'll see you guys later on. All right, so good stuff. I wanted to make sure I said thank you to my children for doing a really good job here over the course of the last little bit, and wish my daughter a happy birthday as well. She's doing well. James Wade says the beard line's coming in too low. Maybe so. That's the hardest part, James, is keeping it trimmed so it looks good. Maybe it needs to come up a little bit. Problem is, maybe you may be right about that. Thanks for the thoughts on that, James. I think there's a chance you may be right. A couple more comments. We're going to get ready to wrap things up for today. Stephen Venzanzi and Christopher Wilson, thanks for sharing the happy birthday messages. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. Let's see what else. Over here on Facebook to wrap things up. Thanks for the kind words, Daniel Aldrich. BA's Bites would have been a nice name for the cooking segment. It's not a bad idea. Not a bad idea. Jeremy Chapman says, how do you think the time away will affect the younger players and their maturity? I think the one thing I can say with confidence on that, Jeremy, we'll make this our last comment and wrap up. One thing I can say with confidence is I think it's going to be a measurement of who has maturity and who doesn't. Because, as I've said a million times, for those of us who've dealt with working from home, and I think in some form or fashion, we've probably all had to deal with some of this a little bit. Being self-motivated, it's just not an easy thing to necessarily do. Different people have different doses of that. So it's one thing to Instagram yourself doing a workout. It's another thing to keep up the grind every single day when it's not for the cameras. And, for some of the young players around college football, there is probably going to be a little bit of disappointment for them when they get back to campus and they realize, wow, I'm not in as good a shape as I need to be, and I'm not going to be able to magically flip a switch and get to be there. Some guys may be, close enough that a little bit of extra work during the summer gets them where they want to be. For other guys, especially in an intense league like the SEC, they may realize they've cost themselves one of their prime college years by not being at their best physical condition. It's kind of unfair that they've been forced to deal with a global pandemic in the way that, previous generations of college football players kind of haven't, at least not in a long time. But it's just kind of a fact. So we will probably see some effects from this. And I don't know that you can necessarily predict how it's going to go. A lot of people assume, well, the offense will be farther behind because it's a new system, a lot of new players, that requires timing and chemistry. That may be true, but that may not quite be as true as people assume. I think the biggest part of this is going to be the physical condition you show up in. Have you found a way to get good nutrition? Because really, for anybody who's ever tried to lose weight or try to get in better shape, what you eat is probably more important than the exercise that you do. And even for football players who have these aggressive workout regimens, I still think the calories that you put in your body, enough protein for the guys that need to add muscle, enough lean, foods for the guys who are trying to be careful not to get a little too heavy. That's really tough. And you've seen the cool videos that the gal that's been recently hired to run the nutrition program, some of the stuff that she's been doing, trying to help players educate themselves, and really average fan as well, educate themselves about how to cook good, healthy, nutritious food that doesn't cost a ton of money. But that's a real challenge. And listen, I'm going to tell you right now, it's been very easy during this lockdown time for me to eat sliders or nachos or, stuff that's got way too many carbs. It's just easy to do that. So I think we'll see some examples of that for players as well once they get back on campus. But I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of the SEC teams are trying to get back June 1st as opposed to June 15th. And what goes down on Friday in terms of that vote taking place will be a really important part of that. All right, we're going to wrap up, but we're going to have a fun edition of our podcast coming up in just a couple of minutes. For more on the Newman Pickens topic, we'll do that there. And we'll take your comments tomorrow back in studio as a part of DawgNation Daily, presented by ESOG Live in our DawgNation World Headquarters Studios. Can't wait to do that. Huge thanks to R.S. Andrews as well for making the cool down possible here today. And then back in its customary spot at the end of the show tomorrow. I've also got some cool stuff coming, I think, for the cool down that we're going to talk more about later on as well. For now, though, for the final time here at home, and I got to make sure I don't forget to bring Eddie back with me tomorrow, Gator Hater Updater, 1,298 days. Nice number, approaching 1,300 as we celebrate Georgia's long winning streak against Florida. We'll do so by wrapping up with our Gator Hater Updater. Thanks for being a part of DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia here at my home today. We'll see you back at my home away from home in our DawgNation World Headquarters Studios tomorrow. Talk to you then, everybody.